And welcome back to another devotion. I am Pastor Roy here at Woodlawn Christian Church in Lake City, Iowa, and this devotion is for Thursday, June 12th of 2025. We are in the book of Acts, and today we have made it to chapter 17. We're going to look at the first 9 verses of chapter 17 today. If you remember, on Tuesday we left off with Paul and Silas leaving Philippi. They had gone through all that whole thing with the woman with the power of divination and taking the spirit out of her, the demon, if you will, and then being thrown into jail and getting sprung from jail, and then insisting the magistrates come and be the ones to set them free. And the magistrates seemed to have about had enough of Paul and Silas, and kind of, perhaps nicely said, kind of take the road, the show down the road a ways, please. Get out of town, in other words. So they do, but there is a shift here. In verse 1, it's now when they had passed, instead of saying when we had passed. So it appears that Luke has stayed behind in Philippi, or at some point before they get far down the road. Would make sense he's in Philippi, but we don't know for sure. Perhaps he's just wording it that way. But it would appear that Luke has stayed behind. And don't worry, he will catch up. We haven't lost Luke for good. Don't know about Timothy, but we know that Paul and Silas have left town. Now they're going to move about 200 miles down the road to go to Thessalonica, is where they're going to end up at for today. So it's roughly 200 miles down the road. So with that, I apologize if I slaughter any of these Greek names again, but here we go. Chapter 17 in Acts, verses 1 to 9. Now when they had passed through Amphiphalis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, and for 3 weeks he argued with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. But the Jews were jealous, and taking some wicked fellows of the rabble, they gathered a crowd, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the people. And when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brethren before the city authorities, crying, "These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also, and Jason has received them, and they are all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus." And the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard this. And when they had taken security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. Okay. Security, they fined them basically. They extorted money out of them for whatever, as security. It says, again, don't do this again, and make sure you don't do it again. I'm going to fine you, and if you do it again, probably going to kill you. It doesn't say that, but that's kind of what we would assume. Paul and Silas would have been in probably a lot more trouble had they been there. But they're going to leave. We'll talk about that next week, though. So, at any rate, it kind of is interesting at the beginning here. It makes it sound like Thessalonica is just hop, skip, and jump down the road, just a little bitty ways, It's 200 miles. We need to walk on 200 miles roughly. I think it's 190 some miles, but at any rate, 200 miles, close enough, ain't it? At any rate, you're walking it. That's a long walk. That's not just a hop, skip, and a jump. Reminds me of my father. He back on the ranch. He would love to say to you, "Slip on over and do this." Well, slip on over. That's 50 miles away, and that's not slipping. At any rate, that's another story. Just reminded me of that. But at any rate, makes it sound like it was no big deal, but it was. That's a bit of a journey in those days. If you're walking today, that's a journey. One of the things that we really wish we had here, he's quoting from the Scriptures. He's quoting from the Old Testament, from the Pentateuch, where the proof is for the Christ. We'd love to have those proofs, know what he was quoting. We have the proofs ourselves. We know what we see, where we see Jesus. I really would love to see where Paul saw Jesus in the Old Testament, to see how those line up, how that all meshes together, But we don't have that, unfortunately. Luke didn't give that to us. Luke wasn't with him on this one. But at any rate, the same thing that happened back in Philippi. You're talking you're talking about this Jesus being king. That means Caesar's not the cult of the emperor. There's the problem. So people gin up some trouble. It says here they, where is that? Wicked folks of the rabble. It says here. There's thugs, hired some street thugs to go and cause problems for them. That sounds a lot like something we got going on in this day and age, but we won't go there. Try to stay away from politics. But there are some, seems to be that modus operandi has not changed in the world. People still employ some thugs to do their dirty work, if you will. At any rate, the other thing here that we see is Paul is back to his old MO. In Philippi, there was no synagogue, but now in Thessalonica, it's a bigger town. There's a synagogue there. Might be more than one. And he's gone there, and he is convinced some Jewish folks, and he's picked off again some more of the God-fearers, some of the Greeks that are there, that are believers in Judaism, they're believers of the God of Isaac and Abraham, but they aren't ready to go quite the whole way, and so he's bringing them into, again, as I've talked before, this Jewish light that that is. Paul is really in the process of creating this. This is really, Paul is the one that does the legwork to create what we know today as Christianity. It's still a sect of Judaism, though. Don't forget that. In Paul's lifetime, it never is anything but a sect of Judaism. It's what many would have considered a heretical sect, but nonetheless, it's still working under the auspices of that. Don't forget, as we get further on in Acts, where's Paul going to be arrested? In the temple. All right? So, Paul has not turned his back on Judaism at this time for certainty. All right? So, with that, we'll pick up with Paul and Silas in Berea on Tuesday, of next week. Have a blessed day. Be a blessing to someone today. The best way to bless them would be to tell them about Jesus. All right? Take care. God bless. See y'all later. Bye-bye.